Hello and welcome, everyone. I am so honored you are taking the time to be here for this Global Confluence, trailblazing back to our roots, liberating from the spell, and awakening our divine nature. We are gathering around this virtual fire with leaders and visionaries, wisdom keepers, and truth seekers to weave conversations of the mind back into the heart, breaking up the concrete that keeps us away from our sacred connection with the land. In this fire circle, we'll be exploring how others have trailblazed back to their roots, unraveled from the spell, and listened to the sovereignty of our divine selves stir. It is time we awaken from the amnesia and remember. As the acorn knows its destiny, it is time now that we as a human family awaken to the encoding written in our DNA to become like the oak tree. Let us be guided by those who have come before us and by these conversations at this virtual fire circle to step into our role as sacred stewards of our beloved Mother Earth. Let's trailblaze back to our roots, one rooted in nature. My name is Liisa Korpela, and I am your host and fire tender for this event. And I'm thrilled to be here today with Anne Baring, a trailblazer back to our roots, bringing in this divine feminine wisdom. Welcome to this conference here, Anne.
Lovely to be here, Liisa. Really nice.
Thank you. And before we start, I'd love to just share with the audience about your bio. Dr. Anne Baring, PhD, was born in 1931 and is a historian and Jungian analyst. She's the author and co-author of 8 books, among them The Myth of the Goddess, The Mystic Vision, The Divine Feminine, and The Dream of the Cosmos, A Quest for the Soul in 2020. And in July 2023, she published Messages from a Transient Dimensions, the messages received by her mother from 1943 to 1968. She is shortly publishing Divine Wisdom and the Holy Spirit, the Forgotten Feminine Face of God. The ground of all of her work is a deep interest in the spiritual, mythological, shamanic, and artistic traditions of different cultures. Her 2 websites are devoted to a new vision of reality and the choice that lies before us as a species at annebaring.com and anne-baring.com, which I will include all of those on her speaker pages. And I'm so excited to be diving into this conversation of waking up from our divine nature from a 4,000-year spell. I love that you can actually put a number to the spell that we have been on. And before we dive in, I just would love to share this quote of yours in a lecture that you did about the myth of scientific materialism and scientism. And you say that we are the only conscious beings in a vast, uncaring, dead universe that is without intelligence, consciousness, meaning, or purpose. God and the soul are no more than residual superstitions. Consciousness originates in the neurons of the brain and dies with the death of the physical body. So there is no survival of the soul. And I think that is so well puts exactly this place that we are in through, hundreds of thousands of years of a mindset of scientism and scientific materialism, which has really kind of pulled us away from this sacred dance of our humanity and kind of created a lens that really is led to so much now destruction that we can see on the planet and our disconnection from nature, really. And so I would love to just dive in this conversation about, what do you think is the most important thing, especially for women at this time in this world as we are deep in this hypnosis of progress? So I'd love to dive into that.
Well, I think the most important thing is for women to see that they've been kind of hypnotized for millennia into believing that they are inferior, that they can't speak their truth, that they can't live from their heart. They have to be trained to live from their mind. They need to wake up to the indoctrination they've received over these 4,000 years when patriarchy started about 4,000 years ago, and how they've been conditioned to just accept all this and to bring up their children with these beliefs. and to believe in a religion which doesn't give the full truth at all. The Christian religion, or none of the religions, give the full truth of our divinity and our immortality. They don't even touch upon it because we are considered to be a fallen species, a tainted, sinful species by Christianity, which is simply ridiculous when you think of the huge agenda since the beginning of our species, what it's achieved in the way of wonderful artifacts, architecture, paintings, writings, stone carvings, incredible. The artistic heritage of our species is simply phenomenal. And I think women need to be much more educated into what happened in the past, also to the artistic heritage of our species, and to look at how they're bringing up their children. What values are they giving them? What are the schools teaching them, which they may or may not approve of? What about the vaccinations, which they're forced to have? Why do they tolerate those? Can they see that their government is actually totalitarian in tendencies, that it wants to control everyone from birth to death, so to speak? All this women need, I think, to wake up to, because a lot is happening now, which is gravely wrong, even evil, and they need to see the light and realize that, really ask help from the earth, because they're part of the earth, our bodies are part of the earth, and ask for help from the heavens, from the starry heavens above them. Both, as you said in your introduction, really, that we are aligned to both, and we need to remember that we are part of both. There's a most beautiful saying from the Orphic Mysteries that I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone. Isn't that beautiful? I am a child of earth and starry heaven, but my race is of heaven alone. Just remember that, women. Wake up to who you are. Wake up to the beauty of your souls and to the that you have through all these millennia of experience. Think of all the births that have taken place from the beginning, so to speak. You have held the human race in your hands because you are the birther. You are the nurturer. You are the person who gives the child its initial bonding with somebody who loves and cares for them. Even the first instance when the child is put on a mother's breast, that is so important. As the bonding takes place, the instinctive bonding, the child knows that it's safe, that it has trust in life and in the mother. And if there's no trust at that initial moment, if the childhood is distorted by pain or suffering and cruelty, then the trust goes and fear takes its place. Those are the two opposites that we have to watch out for. One is the fear we're conditioned to unnecessarily for the way we bring up our children, and B, the need for trust to replace that fear. Trust in the heart, trust in the right hemisphere of the brain, which has been hardly active in all that time. We've been conditioned by left hemispheric thinking. There's nothing wrong in left hemispheric thinking, but it has to be balanced by the right hemisphere. Otherwise, it gives a distorted image of reality. Stop me if I'm talking too much.
Oh no, it's great. I mean, so much like that balance needs to be restored, right? And so as we've kind of moved from left and right brain, like how can we create the synergy, and that even from this patriarchal world, how can men reclaim that sacred masculine duty so that we can actually come together as our sacred feminine duty, as together, as a species, instead of this divided genders, divided races, divided, religions.
Well, that's what the left hemisphere does. It divides because it wants to feel safe and secure. So it makes categories of things, and then it believes what it's made in what it's created, instead of connecting with the right hemisphere, which would give it a far wider perspective. And it would give it a sense of being part of one whole, not divided into little bits and categories, as you just said, or different races or countries, etc. So we need that wider perspective, and we need it very urgently now, at this most dangerous and crucial stage of our evolution. If we get it wrong now, we've had it. And that would be the end of our species, probably. So it's very important that women wake up to what's going on, wake up to the continual emphasis on more wars, preparation for more wars, preparation of weapons, always greater weapons. They have the power to put a stop to all this by the way they're bringing up their children. And they can challenge, if they speak out, they can challenge the ethos of the culture, which is all about power and conquest and greed for power, really, on the part of many different dimensions of our lives, whether you look at government, whether you look at medicine, with its power over the child with vaccinations. These are not things which benefit our bodies, which have a wonderful immune system. And if you destroy that immune system with constant vaccinations, far too many, a few is okay, for instance, polio and diphtheria and things like that were necessary at the stage they were started. But we have far too many now, quite unnecessary. And all those accumulation of vaccination destroy the immune system of the child. By the time it's 6 or 7, it has autism or other symptoms or allergies, or because it's survive this assault on its integrity.
Well, and yeah, and we're in this place where we're being taught by leaders that we're hackable animals or we're useless eaters, right? That this is, and I just love this, you know, you're bringing the awareness, like us humans, we are artistic, creative, just beings that have created so much accomplishment. And yet here we are in a world that there are some who think that they can take this global stance and really kind of create these conversations that we are the hackable animals and we are the useless eaters, that we are just a unit in the digitalization of this whole world. And so we have huge organizations like the UN and the WHO and the WEF that are starting to create a lot of authority around and control in our lives that are not, these are not elected officials, right? These are people that are coming together with an idea of doing good for humanity. And yet what we're seeing is some very interesting strategies that are being laid out. And I'm curious what your insights are on this topic.
Well, my insight is the same as yours. I see that, unfortunately, the UN, which started off with such high ideals, has become an instrument, really, of controlling people more and more, together with the WHO, the World Health Organization, and above all, the WEF, whom you just mentioned, which is really a sinister organization which has one design, which is to control humanity. With a few people, that all the useless eaters will be banded together and just told what they can do or what they can't do. And they can be hacked, as they say, with all the technology that we have. We can be manipulated and pushed like sheep into a sort of pen where we will do what we're told. And if we don't do what we're told, we won't get food. We won't get the energy we need. We'll be deprived of things which have always been part of our existence, really, which we've taken for granted, perhaps too much. But these are sinister organizations, or they're turning into sinister organizations. And in a little while, we'll hear about bird flu, and there'll be a pandemic about that. And that will be a deliberately created flu, or in whatever it might be, virus, deliberately created in order to probably deprive us of chickens, poor chickens, and also frighten us again, because fear will be used as propaganda tool. You have to watch out, women, for that propaganda tool of fear coming through your television screens, your mobiles, your social media. Pay no attention to it. Just say bugger off and just stop bothering me with this stupid nonsense that you go on. But you have it probably from every television screen, every program. Oh, we got to take care. We got to do what we're told. We've got to obey the authorities. They know better than we do. All that is rubbish. You've got to trust your own heart and your intuition. And perhaps your intuition has been dormant for a very long time and needs to be woken up. This is the Sleeping Beauty. It's the whole story of the Sleeping Beauty and the Hedge of Thorns, that the Sleeping Beauty has been asleep for 4,000 years. And the Hedge of Thorns are all the beliefs that we had in the way of awakening up that Sleeping Beauty, which is our soul, our intuition, our divine beingness, and our awareness that we are immortal. Those things are things that we should know about, but they've been shut off from our knowledge by mostly religion, but also by the authority of the state and what we've been told to do by the state. Called up all our young men, slaughtered in wars, which didn't have to come into being at all if we'd known how to negotiate and calm people down instead of going at them with every sort of weapon that we can muster. So even now, the poor soldiers in Ukraine, many of them are deserting and hiding, either staying in house or going into other countries if they can get away. Why should they be slaughtered? Why should the Russian soldiers be slaughtered? For nothing, lose their lives at the age of 20? It's an abominable crime on both sides that this should happen. But it's so much a part of our history that it just seems to be happening again naturally, sort of thing. It's just taking place once again. But it doesn't have to be so if women really woke up and spoke up, as I'm doing, and saying this has got to stop now.
Yeah, I mean, it's ridiculous that we're still going through these cycles, right? And it's like we can see so clearly the harm, the trauma, the ancestral trauma that happens from these perpetual wars. The people in Gaza who are in a constant state of fear and terror, and how just so far away from just our humanity that these practices and the state of this world is at. And I love how you are dialing in that, like, that once you hear the story of fear, that's when you should put your hackles up and be aware, like, put my tuning fork into intuition, because what's the message underneath this fear, and what is the coercion that is being kind of laid out before us in this way. And so, yeah, we're so how do women kind of, how do we find ourselves, and how do we reclaim this power in these conversations in this world that seems like progress is happening so fast and rapidly, and there's so many parts for all of us to be concerned with.
I think that it's very important for women to communicate with each other in small groups, not large groups, but small groups, just in a friendly sort of way in your town or your village, or wherever you're living. If you live in a big city, well, try and find people who have like-mindedness, perhaps joining some group which is interested in the things that you're interested in. You have to find your way. You have to ask for help with your intuition, and through the divine self, you have to say, guide me to what is right for me. Guide me to where my heart will be happy. Guide me to people who will speak from their heart and can speak to my heart, and I can speak to theirs. Ask for guidance. That's very important, because that's part of really waking up and becoming aware that we can have guidance and that we can have help. We're not alone on this planet. And this is one of the things that's been so sad, that we've been taught that we've been kind of abandoned here and left to get on with it as best we can, which is not true, because we've had great teachers like Jesus, like the Buddha, and many others, Taoist teachers, Muslim teachers, great people, all of them, who have taught us that we have guidance and that we are helped if we ask for it, and that nothing is impossible for that guidance to accomplish once we're in touch with it. Miracles can happen. Things which seemed impossible, boulders in the way, can be removed. And there's no reason to have a job that you don't like, that you feel bullied in. Change your job and ask for help to find the right sort of job to suit your temperament and your gifts, because you have probably many gifts to offer, which may not be offered in the position that you're in. I'm not speaking for, obviously, for everyone. Some people are perfectly happy in their jobs, but other people are not, and they're exhausted by them. And women may be exhausted by the job, plus trying to bring up the children if they have children. It's too much physically and mentally to do both. It's very, very difficult unless you have domestic help. I know this from my own experience. I've had a daughter and a grandchild, a grandson. And because the daughter's marriage went wrong, we brought up the grandson as well. So I've had experience with both, as it were, and I had help when I needed it. But because they were both dyslexic, they couldn't be accepted into normal schooling. So that was another problem. And to have dyslexic children when you are yourself are a writer, and for the poor children to know that they can't be like their mother and father, that's a great burden. So I had to work all that out. But I had help, as I say, and the children have turned out okay and getting on with their lives. One of them is a farmer. The grandson is a farmer, engaged with the earth, and we're pleased to see. And my daughter was a riding teacher, but her business collapsed in the recent COVID and huge charges of electricity and everything. So she had to close that this spring. But what seemed like a tragedy was actually a blessing, because she's now free to do other things. And she's free to live her life in a different way. And she's not so exhausted by having to work from 7 in the morning till 9 at night with the horses. So as a mother, I'm quite pleased that this catastrophe happened, because I could see that there would be more to her life than she realized at the time. So there again, things that appear to be tragedy or difficult may be an opening, and one has to look upon life in that way. Is a door opening? With one door closing, is another one opening? Have trust that you're being guided, and have trust that as humanity as a whole is being guided through this very difficult passage. We're being helped by angelic beings with different orders of reality that we know nothing about, because we've been told they don't exist. Our education has been completely based on scientific materialism, unless one has been fortunate to have an artistic background or parents or musical parents or something like that, to lift one out of this dead wood of materialism. So that's really what I feel, what I've experienced. I'm now 93. I don't feel or look it, although my legs feel it a little bit. I can no longer prance around like a 20-year-old, but I can still walk, and that's lovely to be able to walk. And it's very important to take exercise. Anybody over 60 should be exercising at least 2 or 3 times a week, either walking or going to a gym. Because unless you exercise your legs and your trunk, you get weak as you get into your 70s and 80s. So it's very, very important to factor exercise of some kind into your daily routine or your weekly routine. And also to look at your diet. What sort of food are you eating? Is it food that's been interfered with, lots of additive things put into it? Is it biologically authentic, as it were? Where has it come from? Have you got a garden and you can grow vegetables? Because that would be wonderful if you had. So all these things are important. And for God's sake, never touch Bill Gates' dreadful manufactured, factory-produced insect food. Never touch it. And there again, these men, they think that they can produce all these things that will accept them. But, you just have to tell them to go to hell and take their insects somewhere else. We don't need them.
Yeah, it's very strange that we are finding solutions of, we cut down the trees and bury them to capture carbon, or we're going to alter the cow's flatulence so we can not have as much gas. And there's completely no conversation based on reality of like, actually, what is restorative agriculture? What is a way to be in real relationship with the land versus these processed, homogenized, unknown ingredients that, is a massive amount of consumption on the planet of ingredients that we can't even pronounce. Our body obviously doesn't know. We never evolved with these things. And those solutions, are not being guided, that we're being told that, that organic farming is some kind of malfunctioning, creating more carbon. I mean, all of these things are just, when we sit down in a conversation with our lady friends, it's pretty obvious what's going on, that these
Well,
things are not.
it's very funny. It's very funny, really. I mean, when you think about it, they have managed to manufacture a poor cow who has less flatulence. And, what is this interference with nature? Why is there this fear of nature that we have to control it, that we have to ameliorate it or improve on it? Where does this arrogance come from? And I think it comes straight from scientific materialism and the idea that we're the boss. We can do anything we want. And nature just has to take it. If we decide to do something like change the poor cow, the cow has to just accept it, has no choice. And the same with vaccinations. I go back to that we have been given no choice. We're just told we have to have them. And parents are not given the choice at all. This is an order, so to speak. This is outrageous totalitarian control. And they'll think of something else. And the amount of farts that come from the number of cows on the planet is not going to really make a huge difference to what other parts of the industry are doing. And I think that climate change has been used, just like the pandemic. Both of those things have been used as bats to beat us with, frighten us with. We're told if we don't do this, that, and the other, that the climate is going to go up too high and it will all be cooked to death by the heat. But other scientists are saying that the Earth is actually cooling. So there's another point of view, and I think women need to acquaint themselves with both points of view so that they can decide who's telling the truth. Because it's so easy to frighten everybody and put them into 15-minute cities, say that you have to do this, that, and the other thing. You have to eat this food, and not that food. You have to have certain forms of electricity, but not anything that we've had before. In this country, there's a plan to put those huge wind turbines all across the country, just in great strips from north to south. But they don't think about what's being done to the landscape. They see a technological solution and impose it, but they don't ask nature, are you pleased with this? Do you think it's a good idea? They don't ask any questions at all. It's just our will prevails and we will do what we want to do. And women can speak up there and say, well, you don't have to do what you want to do. There are other ways. And let's think about them. What could be the other ways that we could do this? So I feel very strongly about that. I think that we've been conditioned to think that we can control nature in every conceivable way, and that by controlling we'll have good results. But we've embarked on geoengineering, and those 5G masts, which are very dangerous to our immune system. And also there are means of controlling us later on when they get to digitalization of everything. They will be affecting our bodies and our thoughts and things like that, which I don't know whether they intended that in the beginning, but that's what's happening in the end result. So all these technological things, and chemtrails is another thing. These chemicals are being spread by airplanes all the time. Why? Women need to ask, what's going on here? Why should our skies be polluted with these chemicals? Why should they fall on the earth and pollute our food? Because women really need to speak up as the guardians of nature rather than the exploiters of nature. That's terribly important because they've been the guardians of life from the beginning, nurturing life. And I think now they have to nurture nature like they nurtured life all the way through, and just put an end to this idea that man is in master of nature or can control nature. This is a complete illusion which will lead to disaster sooner or later.
Yeah, that is such an important part, because really, us falling out of the garden is really falling out of this consciousness that we are connected to nature, and that we, now that we are living in this place of dominion over and extractive, the nature is just a resource to be extracted, and it's finite, and so we have to, all survival of the fittest, grab the resources before somebody else does, um and in no way connected, to the bounty that nature provides for us when we're in reciprocal, respectful relationship.
Well, that's right. And it's the lack of the heart. It's altogether thinking through the mind and neglecting the right hemisphere, which are connected to the heart, which is the imagination, because the imagination is blocked. So they only see tunnel vision of this and that has to be done, sort of thing. But they don't have the other perspective, which is, well, why does it have to be done? And just slow things down a bit and reflect and feel as if you were feeling what nature is feeling. This is terribly important, and this is something that women can really bring to the culture, because this has been their experience over millions of years, or thousands and thousands of years anyway. They've been the nurturers and carers of this new life coming into being. They've given it everything they can, from their own milk to the preparation of food. For millennia, they've been the preparers of food, and they originally probably were the people who cut the wheat and ground it into flour and things like that, who discovered how to grind wheat into flour. So all this is very important. They need to look back at what they learned in the way of technical skills as mothers, and see how that was all based and coming from feeling, from the heart, and from the love of their children and the care of the children's lives. Because their first thought when there is a threat coming their way is, how can I save my children? What can I do to protect them? The man also, one mustn't diminish the male role there also, but men have been conditioned to copy the group much more than women have. Women have been able to have their own independence and integrity, even if kept very quiet about it, but they haven't had the desire to join the group as en masse, so to speak, because men are conditioned to obey authority right from the beginning of school, to look up to the teacher, who may be male, and to be conditioned really to obey. When the call comes out, you have to do this. They instinctively follow whatever the other group of males are doing, like in war, for instance. They can't think for themselves. They can't say, I won't do this. I value my life. I won't do this, unless they are beginning to now. But before, there was no chance. You were co-opted into the military before you were 18, really. And that's what boys were educated to and grew into as young men. I remember my father being asked by his father, who do you value most? Who do you love most in all the world? And my father, first of all, said mother. And then he said father. And his father said, no, king and country is what you love most in all the world. And my father never forget that. He was about 8 years old when his father told him that. And that's what men of his generation, my father's generation, they were brought up like that. There was no question that king and country were what you had to obey and follow and serve. But that's changing radically now, because for instance, England has virtually no army to speak of. So this is a big change. And possibly it may be happening in the States as well, I don't know. But bringing up children to be warriors needs to be absolutely repudiated.
It's interesting how the conversation is for men to be connected to, the king and country. And this word country, which is in Australia, is used as the word for land or nature, that they are in connection with country, right? And country is a living, the living Gaia. And yet in England, we have country now basically being usurped, this consciousness of nature, and country is now a state, is part of the statehood. right? The statedom. And so it's this like mental construct that goes over land versus in connection with the land. And so, you know, all of these ways that we are pulled away from our awareness of being in the web of life, you know, into this dominion consciousness over, and that we can just that we can war our ways into you know, more resources and more land grabs or whatever they may be. But just yeah, there's so many layers to really what you're bringing forward, and all the different ways that our industrial world right now is usurping dominion over nature as a way to control it. And yet we know nature is wild and feminine. It has this feminine energy and is moves in its own intelligence, right? And so we're kind of not tapping into the intelligence of nature by just walking over this land and extracting. And um and so how do we, you know, how do we bring ourselves, how do, you know, I love that women coming together to amplify these conversations of connection with nature and growing gardens. And how else can we like awaken the people around us into these conversations about you know, who we really are, and why am I here, and why do I serve, and what do I do when I die? I mean, even that conversation, we live in a culture that is has a lot of fear around death, and so that actually perpetuates a lot of dysfunction.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very important point because death has been the really the bugbear or whatever you want to call it for as long as we've been around, so to speak. But there were cultures who knew that we don't die when we die, that our souls are immortal and the body dies because it gets worn out, but also that we're reincarnated again and again, not only on this planet, but on other planets in the solar system. So we probably move around like moving house from one to the other. But none of this has been taught. It's beginning to come out now. And the fact that people have had these near-death experiences has helped a lot because they've been able to contact their loved ones when they have these experiences. And there's somebody called Wayne Dyer who's done a lot with his daughters, apparently, in America, which has been on the humanities team network for some time now. So there are a lot of people speaking up on humanities team and the Shift network. You can learn a lot from the courses given there. I have taken in my life quite a few courses. I did a 9-month course with a Peruvian shaman who was absolutely marvelous. So there are things that you can expand your consciousness with and learn to connect more with nature, meditate a little bit every day, making that connection with the earth and with the trees, with the flowers, with the plants, whatever you might be growing. There's a wonderful series of books, which I'll tell you about, which I've just finished reading. They're called the Anastasia books, and you can look them up if you like. And they're a wonderful story of how one shamanic woman has been able to change the consciousness of Russia and also many other places by saying that if each person had 1 hectare of land and planted trees all around it, the kind of trees that bear fruit or that are good for nourishing the earth and everything, then build a little house on it, um, that would be okay. That's okay when there's plenty of land, as there is in Russia. But it doesn't work in England, where there's hardly any land to spare. So it doesn't work everywhere, but it's a wonderful idea. And those books are changing the consciousness of millions of people. So I recommend them thoroughly. Have you read them yourself?
I haven't read all of them. I've read some of them, but
Read
yeah,
some
they're
of them.
great.
But he's so clever, that man. He's so clever with what he's done and how he's done it. And it weaves a sort of spell on the person who's reading. And it's really an enchantment. But it's a different way of looking at everything. And this Anastasia goes back to a very old culture in Russia, which she calls the Vedic culture, when people were much closer to the animals. They didn't kill them for food. The animals brought them food and sort of nourished them and looked after the young and things. It's quite amazing. Anyway, she brings a different perspective onto what life could be. and how we've moved so far away from where we should be that it's going to be quite difficult to get back to square one, so to speak. But I think that women have a tremendous potential and a tremendous opportunity to bring about huge change. Once they become aware of their role and their power and their potential, and not get sucked into the power thing themselves, because that's at the root of all the problems, is the need for power, which, to go back to death, is the compensation to the fear of death. That's basically what it is. That underneath everything, it's, if I don't do this, I won't survive. And if I don't survive, it means I die, and I don't want to die, so I've got to have power to prevent myself dying. And if necessary, I have to kill other people in order to survive myself. So this is a whole misapprehension of the fact that we don't die when we die. We go on, and we're immortal beings, which is a most extraordinary idea that I hope will take root as we become more aware of the divinity that we are and the wholeness that we are, and how we are all part of this one life that comes, God knows where from, so to speak, but is the ground of being, which is the consciousness that we have, the small bit of consciousness we have, comes from this wider consciousness of the whole universe. And we are part of it. We're not separate from it. So this, we need to change our whole idea of who and what we are. And I hope my new book will help to do that. And I must say, I do hope so. I'm just working on the last chapters now. And I hope that it will help women to become aware of how important their role is, and how the missing image of the divine feminine has given us the wrong idea of what life is about. Because if the archetypes were balanced, we would be balanced in ourselves. Having only the male archetype has given us a misapprehension of who we are and what we are, and has given far too much emphasis to the male thing of dominance and power, and not to the heart, always to the control coming through the mind.
Yeah,
There again,
it's a
the
really,
feminine.
like, the kind of, when I started to dive into actually how some of this social engineering has been happening through history, and to really, what I thought was a great, this feminist movement, the liberation of women, ended up really kind of backfiring in this way, because it created this illusion that women were supposed to be more male-like, more domineering out in the workforce, and completely took away the sacred role of women as the caregivers of family, right? And so now we have a whole world and culture that both parents have to leave the house to take care of family, and then somebody else takes care of your kids, right? And so this is such a breaking apart of family and what our sacred role as women are.
It was a kind of psychosis that took over about 30 years ago. I remember being, as a young woman, being in that feminist thing, thinking about whether I should do this, that, and the other. But it was there's a wonderful man called Matthias Desmet, who's written a book called The Psychology of Totalitarianism, which I urge everybody to read, because he shows how we can be pushed into what he calls a mass hypnosis sort of state. He calls it mass formation, but it's really a kind of hypnosis which takes over a group. And it took over the feminist movement. And they got, as you say, right on the wrong end of the stick. They got the wrong idea of copying men and being as powerful as men. They got onto the power thing, fatal to any new movement. And they've really done nothing except to make a lot of women work far too hard and lose touch with their families and think that they have to sacrifice their lives to make money, and so on and so forth. So that all that is just a kind of diversion that we got into. And I had to struggle with that when I was in my 20s, I think, and also when I had my child, my daughter. The pull between wanting a career, which I had. I became a dress designer and I had a business in London selling dresses, but I had help at home to help with that. and a lovely, lovely Italian girl who came to be an au pair sort of thing and made all the difference. But I didn't really think it through in my 20s. I didn't look at what I was doing because I was too immersed in just living. I didn't have time to think and reflect on what I was doing and whether my husband was happy in what I was doing and all that sort of thing. So I think women need to realize that their greatest gift is their experience as mother and daughter, both mother and daughter, right the way through for millions of years. And certainly for the last 50,000 that we can trace sort of in an actual historical way. So this is their most important gift, and it's been completely neglected. Nobody's mentioned that being a woman is important just because you are a woman. You don't have to copy any other model, male model or anything else. You have to trust who you are and why you have been born a woman. Why am I born a woman in this day and age? What was the calling that brought me to this planet and has made me a woman instead of a man? That's a very important question to ask. And are you happy with that? Some people are not happy. They feel they're in the wrong body. But that could come from a memory of another life when they were in another gender body, So that all that needs to be looked into in a completely dispassionate and objective way, and not getting emotionally involved with being this or that, but just look at what you've been called. Why are you here on this planet as a woman? What is your gift? What are your great gifts? What can you render as service to life? Where can your gifts be expressed that would be a service to life? It may be just caring for children, which is very important, but it may also be artistic, musical, technological, engineering, whatever you're talented to do. Find the avenue where you're gifted and follow it to develop it in something which will bring you to the full capacity of what you are gifted with. Don't just dabble around in things, but learn how to do things properly.
That's so beautiful. Really, just the invitation, that we have at this time to really listen in. Why are we here, and why did we choose to be women at this time to awaken from this spell that has been um, put on women for thousands of years? And how many more lives do we need to wake up to this power and this beauty within us, and this the conversation that we really need? For wholeness, we need both the sacred and this masculine, feminine, and together, in union, that both of these qualities are within us. And yet we are here for a very specific reason at this time, to remember and bring ourselves back into connection with nature, because I feel like in the climate crisis, it's really about a consciousness crisis, and it's the crisis that we are separate from this beautiful planet that we are living on. And so, how to restore connection to how to restore the planet is really reconnecting with ourselves and family and community and our humanness, in this beautiful dance.
And
So
remember is also remembering, putting together, bringing together things that have been separated,
exactly, the parts,
the
all the
parts.
members, all the
Yeah,
parts that have been scattered to the wind. How can we remember all of these parts to create our wholeness, right? And
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Well, is there anything else, just such rich sharing, that you would love to share with the audience about um, how we can support ourselves through awakening from this spell and reconnecting with our divine nature?
I think we've covered the ground pretty well between us. I think there's not much more to add. I don't think. I don't have anywhere where people can contact me, but I've got a website where they can find many, many webinars that I've given. including one on Mary Magdalene, which is important because I think we can talk about her for a minute, because the Christian church did away with Mary Magdalene and said that she hadn't been married to Jesus and had no part in anything at all. Whereas the truth was that she was married to Jesus and that they worked together as partners to bring this new consciousness into being. At the 2,000 years ago, this was what they were incarnated for. Jesus was a very great teacher, and Mary Magdalene had been trained in the mysteries of Egypt. She'd been trained as a temple priestess there before she married Jesus, I think. Jesus had traveled widely in India before he started his mission. So he knew about the Buddhist ideas, and they come through a lot in his teaching. So one has to re-look, which I hope my book will show people, quite a different view of both Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And in channeled messages, which I mentioned, not my mother's, but from books which were written by a man and a woman, they channeled material from the Essenes, which gives absolutely fascinating detail of how Jesus was brought up, what his mission was, and what happened. Because I just have to go into a historical detail that in 623 BC, the first temple in Jerusalem was taken over by a group of people called Deuteronomists, and they changed the whole temple structure, which had been a shamanic tradition in the temple, and they changed that, and they made quite a different interpretation of what the Jews were there for, so to speak. They got rid of the goddess, Asherah, her name was, so that there was no longer a god and a goddess bringing the earth and the creation into being. There was only the god. They got rid of the goddess, and that's where it happened. That was the break point, which is all in my book. But having done that, Jesus and Mary Magdalene were trying to restore the love wisdom tradition of that first temple. And they would have known what the teaching of that temple would have been, because it would have passed down through the Essene group, as it were. And the Gnostics were another aspect of these. They knew the truth as well, but they were destroyed by the Christians, by the Christian church. They were wiped out. Their gospels were destroyed and burnt, and they were killed, many of them. So there's been a history of the suffocation or the stifling of the true tradition many times over, but particularly at that moment, around 2,000 years ago, there was an opportunity for the male and female to come together, but it was destroyed by the Christian church. And they demonized Mary Magdalene. They called her a whore, this, that, and the other. She's been restored to some sort of divinity now, but they still haven't admitted that she was married to Jesus. But this was known in the secret sort of traditions that were passed down. It was known in France for 2,000 years. And there was a church in the 12th century called the Church of the Holy Spirit, which taught as if they were teachings of Jesus and Mary Magdalene together. So it was kept alive, this tradition. So what I'm saying is that we have to realize that we've been indoctrinated into beliefs which are not true, and we've been prevented from accessing the teaching that was true. So we haven't really been given the true teaching of Jesus, which was that each of us carries divinity within us, because we were taught that the whole divinity was put onto the figure of Christ, who died for our sins, so to speak. All that was completely wrong. He did nothing of the sort. He died because he was crucified by the Pharisees. But he knew that he would die, so to speak. He was prepared for it, but he survived the death on the crucifixion. And he returned to India after it, and even to Tibet and Ladakh. All this is known, but of course it's all under the counter, under the covers. So you have to dig around to find out the truth. And don't take the truth of what you've been told as the truth. You have to find out the truth for yourselves. And one of the main truths is that Mary and Jesus were married, and that they were bringing through a new vision of what humanity could be, in touch with the divine, and working with the higher beings, so to speak, to bring about a different culture on this planet, which we now still have the chance of doing if we can wake up sufficiently. We can bring through a different kind of civilization by saying we do not want what we have at the moment. We do not want the exploitation and destruction of parts of nature. We do not want our children to be vaccinated every 6 months or every year or whatever it is. We want freedom from all this indoctrination. And if I was younger, I'd be out in the streets, but I'm not now. I have to stay at home and speak as best I can to people like you, which is lovely for me to meet you, because you've understood so completely what I've been talking about.
Yeah, and just, you're moving with your words, and you're keeping your walking going, so you're keeping your health going, because movement and blood flow is the key to our health. But we need to keep these conversations moving, right? We need to keep these conversations moving right now, because we are on such a precipice of evolution and a great corruption of our genetic code through these genetic modifications and this pollutions, and just, yeah, I just really appreciate what you're bringing forward as stories to reclaim that divine spark within us, and that unification and trusting that intuition within us is the guiding light that's going to help move forward all of humanity at this time, if we can move and use our voices in a way that just can awaken from some of these ideas that we have been trapped under. So I really appreciate that.
I think there's one other thing I should mention. There's something called heart math, which I'm sure you know about.
Yeah.
Well, they've just discovered an amazing thing. They've discovered that the heart is actually connected directly to the quantum field. In the last month, I think they put that out. So I would advise people perhaps to stay in touch with something like heart math, because there's a lot of wisdom there. They've worked hard to integrate the heart and the importance of the heart, and to make it people be able to move consciously from the mind to the heart in their daily lives, and actually speak to the heart and ask the heart what it wants, and how it would like people to live. It's a lovely idea.
Yeah, and it's just this beautiful magnetic electric organ that has such intelligence, right? There's this whole all work being like the intelligence of the heart. There's way more neurons in the heart than even in the brain.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And that when we tap into the heart, and that we're tapping into this quantum field, we actually are making a difference.
Yeah, we are, because even what seems so insignificant and tiny in our little lives, that does affect the whole, definitely. So every little bit that we can put into the whole enhances the whole and helps it to become stronger and more articulated on our planet, so to speak. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for these heartfelt wisdom, and it's been such a wonderful opportunity to be in conversation with you, Anne, and just sharing all your wisdom. And I'm so excited to see your new book that's coming out. I'm sure it's very tapped into the collective awareness that we need right now. And yeah, it's just been an absolute pleasure connecting with you. And I'll make sure everyone, you also have a free gift of a audio series on one of your websites. I'll put a link to. And
That's right. To the Dream of the Cosmos. The whole book is done in audio form on the website, which is ann-baring.com.
okay, perfect. And I'll have all of that included below. And just yeah, I just want to give thanks to all of our listeners who invested time to be in this conversation today, and just having an opportunity to open our minds and connect with our hearts and connect with our divine nature, one rooted in nature. And just to all the listeners, please share this with anybody who you feel moved to share it with, and just looking forward to connecting with you again. And just so much love and gratitude, and thank you, Anne, for this opportunity to be in conversation with you.
Thank you, Liisa. It's been lovely for me.